This is what happens when you let French engineers design a car like an airplane. The Renault Etoile Filante is a turbine-powered prototype made in 1956, and today we're gonna test this monstrosity at Fonteny, also known as the French Nordschleife. So without further ado, let's see how it drives. So we are now exiting the pits at Fonteny aboard of the Renault Etoile Filante, and you can already hear it. This thing, well, it sounds like an airplane and it's just amazing. And it goes actually pretty fast. We're already over 170 kph, so we're gonna slow down a little bit because, as you can also see, this thing, well, it doesn't like to brake correctly. Remember, this car was made in the 1950s, so even though it goes crazy fast, even for modern standards, well, the braking technology is straight from the 1950s. You can also see that this car, well, it takes a lot of time to get to speed. And I'm no expert when it comes to jet engine or turbine engines in this case, but it feels like this car, the faster you go, the faster it gets. And I think it has to do with, well, the technology behind. You have no gearbox here, you have no RPM, you have no traditional engine. This thing was basically powered like an airplane from the 1950s, and that's what's amazing from this. France nowadays is not known as much as it was before for their race cars, but back in the day they were experimenting like crazy with some just amazing prototypes, and this is one of, in my opinion, one of the best weird cars I found yet. It's just so amazing. I mean, have a look at its shape. This thing is all inspired from 1950s sci-fi and made to look even like a spaceship, it looks like. It's just crazy to think that this thing could have raced at least in the 1950s. Just with the sound. Imagine going to a racetrack in the 1950s and hearing this thing that sounds just like your average airplane going airborne. Nowadays, innovation is way more subtle when you look at any kind of industry, but in the automotive industry, everything is way more subtle nowadays because we have it all figured out. But if you look at the 1950s, where there was everything yet to discover when it comes to cars, well, people were doing some crazy stuff. Take even American prototypes like Chaparral from the 1960s that I've already tested. Those cars were all about innovation, all about trying what has never been tried. And I mean, this is just so nice. This is literally what happens when you combine an airplane with a race car. And then look, it goes so fast, it's so nice. I mean, it sounds good, sounds better than an electric car, that's for sure. It drives fast, it understeers like crazy, but I mean, it's part of the thing, right? You cannot expect this thing to handle like an F1. So here we're gonna be careful nicely on the brakes. This turn is quite hard, trying not to hit a house with this airplane. Also knowing that this car is actually super rare. There were only 2 of them ever made. So if we bin it, well, it would be theoretically extremely expensive. But driving wise, as I've already said, this thing drives super nicely. I mean, its main thing is basically that it has an airplane engine, but I think that it has other tricks under its sleeve. It handles actually quite well. You don't have any kind of downforce like you have today, but you can already see by the shape that this car, being inspired by airplanes, well, it had some kind of aerodynamics going on, even though that in the 1950s there was not a lot of aerodynamics going on race cars. So it's really one of those cars that had it like a little bit figured out when it comes to aerodynamics, but not so much. It just behaves really well and it's super relaxing to drive. You would ask me, but how can such a thing be relaxing to drive? Well, since you don't have any kind of, at least not standard gearbox, like on a normal car or race car, you don't have to play around with any kind of gears. This thing drives like an electric car from nowadays, because you just brake or accelerate. The only gear you have to put it on is reverse. And well, the turbines go into reverse mode like on an airplane. But other than that, it just goes straight to 300 kilometers an hour in the first gear, if we can call it this way. I can really tell you, this thing is a mod you gotta try out. it's super fun to try and avoid trees. Oh no, well now that was bad. You didn't see anything, but as I was saying, this is one of those mods I recommend you guys to try out. Just to see how far we've come when it comes to prototyping in the race car world. This feels like some kind of sci-fi crazy invention. And here comes one of the bankings at Fonteny. That's also why it's known as the French Nordschleife. And actually this car handled it pretty well. If you brake enough, well, it behaves super nicely. Oh, that was a lot of understeer, but we made it out alive. I mean, being at the limit with this car feels quite strange, because when you're going fast on the straight, you feel like you're going super fast, and then you arrive at a corner and you have to brake so much that you feel like you're doing it wrong. But actually, I can tell you, well, it shows I was at the limit here. So I would imagine if you took this turbine engine and put it into a modern race car, modified it a little bit to be, well, a little bit more efficient maybe, I think it would be an amazing combo. I mean, imagine putting this engine into a modern day GT3. Imagine just how fun it would be. I don't think it would be competitive because it takes so much time to get into speed, but just the pure fun would be just amazing. And it's one of those cars that will really reward you for carrying speeds the most you can into a corner, because it will snowball on a lot of other segments of the track. Oh, that was... The suspension is incredibly stiff. I mean, when I touch a curb, my wheel just goes crazy. But I mean, it's just still super fun. And here we hit the second banking. Extremely slow, but this thing understeers so much that you really gotta be careful. And even though it has some kind of aerodynamics, it's really not comparable. And the tires we run are also tires from the 50s, so yeah, grip overall is extremely low compared to a modern day car. So it's really about trying to survive as much and as fast as you can. And that was the third banking of this track. The last one, if I remember correctly, so Fonteny has actually more bankings than the Nordschleife has. You have 3 carousels here and the Nordschleife has only 2. I mean, 2 is already quite amazing for a racetrack. I don't know much more racetracks that have bankings like that. And here comes the last straight. So there is one lap around Fonteny aboard of the French prototype, the Renault Etoile Filante, and let's try to bring it to the maximum speed we can. We're gonna bin it at the end of the straight line, but let's see. We're well over 220 kilometers an hour. Let's see. Can we reach 250? 250? Oh. and this, ladies and gentlemen, this is how it ends. But I can tell you, and I mean you've seen it, it's just an amazing fun to drive around those old prototypes. So I recommend you guys try it out yourselves. I will try to find the mods, put them into the description as always. And well, I hope that you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. And until the next one, I wish you guys a beautiful day. Bye bye!